The bridge from this guitar had torn out pretty badly, taking off part of the bridge plate and the top with it. Unfortunately, someone tried to repair this with glue, and then realized they didn't have clamps and they couldn't glue it back together, and the glue all hardened and created a mess. This is a May Bell guitar. It's a solid mahogany guitar, sold by Slingerland, probably from the 1930s, and it's a beautiful instrument in a lot of ways. It's certainly worth repairing, but this mess was pretty extensive. So this guitar was probably made by Regal in Chicago, where Slingerland had its plant. They basically were a reseller of other things. It's possibly was made by Harmony. But they're like I say, this is a solid mahogany guitar, and basically it's a pretty nice guitar, in terrible shape. You could not push the piece back in, so I had to basically route a slot, and in several stages. So the first thing I have to do is I've got to remove the wood so that I can put in a maple plug for the bridge plate. So I do that first, and I route a slot that's going to take off most of the material that's missing, or go through most of the material that's missing in the bridge plate. And I'm watching really carefully so that I can stop at exactly the right spot without going too far. I get that done, and I then have to fit a piece of maple in to the slot that I've just made. So if I have to measure how long the slot is, get it exactly right, and then transfer that to a piece of maple that I've planed to be exactly the width of the router bit, so that it'll slide into that slot, and I have to round the corners, and which I did with a chisel, and make it fit in there pretty snugly. The problem is you've got to monitor the bottom of the bridge plate to make sure you don't protrude too far. So I cut that and got it in place, and things worked out reasonably well at this point in time. Glued it in place and have it fairly well supported. But the problem then became that it then you had to route the spot for the missing parts of the top, and I really couldn't replace any of the material that was stuck to the bottom of the bridge because it was coated in glue, and it just wouldn't fit back in. There was all sorts of messes with respect to that. I used a plastic artist circle gauge to mark the radius on the edge of this piece of wood that I'd fitted to the slot, and then carefully trimmed down the edge with a chisel so that it would be the right size and shape for the hole. And once I had that, the one side done, which is the side on the left here, I worked on the side on the right. So with this Staedtler circle marking gauge, I marked the end where I'd drawn the line for the length of this, and then cut the wood down to the exact size with a chisel going straight down the line. And then I fit it into place and made sure it was fitting fairly snugly into the slot that I'd created. I'm using my hand here on the bottom to make sure that it's going in to the right depth and not going, extending past the bridge plate. It fit pretty well, so it was basically time to glue it into place. So I would use fish glue to glue this in. I really like fish glue for its reversibility. Then you got to get it in so that it basically fits. Again, making sure that's flush on the bottom. That's what my right hand is doing, while my left hand is gently pushing it to get it into the right spot. The plug wasn't quite deep enough, and I had glue on it, so it was a little bit harder to move. So I had to give it a couple of gentle taps with a dead blow hammer just to move it down like a minuscule amount so that it was actually flush with the bridge plate inside the guitar. To deal with the top wood that had been destroyed, I had to make a jig that would cover the area that needed to be removed to allow a mahogany plug to be put in place. So this required a different procedure. I used a bearing mounted router bit to go around exactly the area that this was set to. Again, the fact that the bit was round meant that those square corners on the jig would be rounded, and I could then fit a piece of mahogany into the top and have it fit reasonably well. All of this is going to be underneath the bridge, but I still wanted it to fit pretty well. So when I was done, that's kind of what it looked like. It was fairly straight, and I could then work on putting a piece of mahogany into that slot and replace the missing wood. The jigging of this also allowed me to, when I routed it, it basically took off any excess of the maple that was used on the bridge plate, so that now everything is flush. Getting this all set up to the right height and depth and everything took a fair amount of time and work. The plywood template that I use for routing, I also use to size a piece of mahogany to the exact right dimension so that it fits snugly into that slot. And then I rounded the corners, and because it's the same size as the template that was used to cut the slot, it now fits right into the top itself, and it's backed by the by the bridge plate that was glued up together. So this fits in and replaces the missing material. So I had to glue it into place with, again, I used fish glue. Got the fish glue into the pocket where the new piece of top was going to go, and spread out this fish glue and then clamped it into place. Had to let it sit overnight for the fish glue to cure. Once again, I really like fish glue. I think it's a great adhesive. It's hard. It doesn't creep. It's reversible. So if there's any problems, I could take it apart in the future if I needed to. The clamp was used to push things so that the inlay was down and tight to the bottom, so that the glue would have good surfaces to adhere to. And then once it was pushed down, because the piece was so tight, there was no need for it to be pushed in any further. So I basically clamped it up and made sure that it was pushed down really tight. and left it. With the replacement glue back in place, I can now plane the new piece down so that it is flush with the top, which will allow us to glue the bridge back on to a nice solid surface. So I'm just using a little block plane to level this a bit. When the piece got close to level after using the block plane, I then sanded it to flush. I used a little piece of plastic to protect the surface around where I was doing sanding on the side that was going to be exposed. The side that is closest to us right now, it's going to be covered by the bridge, so I had a little bit more latitude there. I'm going to wash off the any remaining fish glue with water. One of the great advantages of fish glue is the fact that you can wet it and it cleans off, so anything that's sort of excess or not basically in the joint is going to get cleaned off. And then I'm going to fit the bridge in place. There was a small piece that I left on the back of the bridge that fit into a little gap on the right, so I'm just checking to make sure everything fits, and then it's flush and flat, and everything's going to fit well. With the repair done to the top and sides, I had to set the scale length to make sure it intonated properly, and then I re-glued the bridge on, glued the bridge holes, and basically that was it.